So in the true spirit of Unbound, I'd like to thank the Minister who's kindly agreed that we're going to start with an opening panel. So I'd like to invite to the stage Minister Vivian Balakrishnan. Yossi is already in his place, and Professor Tan, thank you very much for agreeing to come onto the panel. Please come up. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a round of applause.
Good to see you.
I know.
If you can actually, yeah, very good. Please sit there. Actually. We'll move a bit closer. Let's. Yeah, you come and sit in the middle. So while we're just miking you up, Minister, I think we'll start by just. It's very lucky that when you're on a panel like this, you don't need to introduce anyone around you. So I think, Minister, what's your impression so far of Unbound? Innovfest unBound. I'm surprised I put you on the spot here. So let's see how you handle that one.
Well, I'm waiting for the fireworks, you'll see.
They're coming. It's funny you should say that. Your security detail probably going to tell us off, but they're happening off.
No, we're not actually so uptight in Singapore. Don't worry.
I've been coming here 14 months, and it's absolutely amazing. So thank you for allowing me back in. And I promise to be on my best behavior, otherwise you won't let me back next year. So thank you. And my mother was very pleased when she found out we were partnering with NUS. She was like, oh, at least now you might actually study. So, and then when I found out Lily studied the same as me, biochemistry, she was like, oh, let's talk. I was like, oh, let's maybe hold that off. Hi, Yossi.
Hi.
When was the last time you were here in Singapore?
1972, when the country was, how old?
You're the mathematician. 7 years.
7 years.
No. And how's it changed?
First of all, I have to say something. When I came here, I was a government official, and I met mainly government people. I was taken away by the vision. What I understood is that the quest of the leader of the country, which unfortunately passed away recently, the administration, the young generation, was to create a model state bringing best practices from all over the world. And it looked very ambitious, you know, like I think population was 2.5 million people. Most of the buildings were 2 stories. But you saw a lot of energy and a lot of desire and it was actually a startup, a whole country startup. And coming now, so many years, I even cannot calculate, the numbers are so big, and seeing this vision, how it came to fruition, I think that even the people I met in '72, which led the country at that time, didn't expect it to become so amazing. And it's really, there is a lot to see here, a lot to appreciate. The people are very motivated, very self-confident, and they go and do things. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I feel like an idiot, which always my mother told me I am, that I spent so many years without coming again.
So we look forward to you coming here many more times for many more Innovfest unBound. Just a few technical things. We have Pigeonhole, which is a great NUS startup, which is all about encouraging questions. So when we go to Q&A later, if you're a little bit shy or don't want to, you can post questions through the passwords on the wall over there, and I'll do my best to answer them. And if you want to join the conversation, our hashtag for Twitter is Innovfest unBound, so post pictures, videos. I know Frank's doing his bit with posting everything and anything, so please let's get social media going. Professor Tan, what does innovation mean to you? You know, you're one of the top universities in Asia. How is quite, you know, Yossi and I were talking actually in the car over that we said, oh, let's discuss doing an event in San Francisco, maybe with Stanford. And we said, actually, I think there's no university like it in the world that would have such a strong base with the startups and cover from startups, digital innovation, to some, you're a nephrologist, as you told me. So how's that happened?
I think innovation starts with imagination. Imagination to see things that others don't. And I think innovation has been combined with a can-do spirit, being able to act on the new ideas and to be able to do them well. And I think finally, innovation is about creating value, doing things which are not just for the sake of saying that you're innovating, but doing things which are useful for people, useful for society, that we can actually add value to the things that are being done. And I think it's very much something that in the National University of Singapore, we are very focus on, and we have many, many programs that try to do all these things, including, I think, this Innovfest, which I think is a fabulous program that helps bring together a lot of people who help to bring this culture of new types of imagination, new types of creativity, and hopefully many meetings of can-do spirit people that will be able to take these forward. So we really look forward to this and to the coming ones in the next couple of years.
Thank you. Minister, I've been reading a lot.
Yossi, can you come and sit over here?
Oh, yeah,
Sure.
Phil, left out.
Sure, thank you.
Now we feel left out. You didn't ask us.
Yes.
That's terrific.
Otherwise,
That's not the microphone.
We'll have a quiz later. I've got the professor, so we'll be all right. I read the other day in the paper that the Prime Minister spoke a lot about Smart Nation, and I know this is your ministry.
Yeah.
Can you maybe share with some of the international audience of what it's about?
Actually, I wanted to, because Yossi hasn't been here since 1972, I wanted to, if you don't mind, I wanted to take a long bound back. We only became independent in 1965.
Yeah,
We didn't fight for independence. We were kicked out. A few countries that got independence by being kicked out of a federation. Secondly, having been kicked out, suddenly we had no hinterland. We had no agriculture. Most of our water was and continues to this day to be imported from Malaysia. We are the only country whose independence documents have stapled to the back of it 2 water agreements, which actually become part of the Constitution of Malaysia. I say that because you understand that we are not supposed to be here. We are not supposed to be an independent sovereign nation. We're not even supposed to have enough water to drink. So what you see in Singapore over the past 43 years since you've been here is an exercise of desperate imagination. So it's not about innovation because it's sexy. This is about survival. We had to establish ourselves. We had to make ourselves relevant to the rest of the world. We were a global city before the word globalization got invented, simply because we were cut off from a hinterland. Secondly, although we were an ex-colony of Britain, and if you go back 50 years, the prevailing political conventional wisdom was get rid of the shackles of the white man, import substitution. You don't talk about globalization and inviting multinational corporations to come here with their technologies, their ideas, their networks, their management, and their market. We did that. Another example, right now we are standing on reclaimed land. In 1972, this was, well, we had just started to reclaim this land from the sea.
It's stable, yeah?
It's stable. You've been away for so long, 43 years, it's very stable, right? But again, if you walk around Marina Bay, and I hope all of you, especially the visitors here, will have a chance to go around Marina Bay. Mr. Lee Kuan Yew had conceptualized, visualized, even planned the little details of where the promontory will be 40 years ago. We got the sand, we planted it, and most of Marina Bay didn't get built except within the last 10 years. So the point is, we had this political luxury of planning long term, and I know you like this, planting seeds and being patient enough to wait for the harvest. So anyway, the point I want to make is that if you want to understand Singapore, you need to understand that this is a highly unlikely existential place that has had to survive through vision, through planning, through imagination, and through innovation. To put this in context, why Smart Nation? Look, I don't need to convince you guys that in the last 50 years, since the invention of the transistor, the internet, the personal computer, the World Wide Web, 3D printing, something fundamental has changed, right? And this is not just a few new, showy tools. These are platform technologies, which means it transforms everything. The way we live, the way we work, the way we play, the way we engage each other. it affects the culture. Everything has changed. So just as in 1972, when suddenly the world had changed for Singapore, we believe the world is also at a new inflection point. So Smart Nation is about pre-positioning ourselves and planting seeds now so that we can harvest in 10, 20, or 30 years from there.
Thank you. Yossi.
Yeah, Mr. Minister, this was really very inspiring. I want to ask you the following question. With all due respect to Singapore, Singapore is not the only country in the world which faced these huge challenges. And yet you see that a group of people, talented, motivated people, was able to do something which nobody in the world was able to do on its own. So it's not only the vision, you need vision, but you need something, I guess, more than vision in order to go and do it. And I think this is very relevant to startup because, as I say, this whole exercise is one big startup. You start with a startup, you start with a vision, you have nothing. And you have to reclaim everything. You don't reclaim land, but you reclaim your market, you reclaim. What is this ingredient which made Singapore so successful?
Well, I'm going to give you a counterintuitive answer. When I took a cruise with Mr. Lee Kuan Yew about 12 years ago to the southern islands and to Marina Bay, as we were coming in, and we saw this wonderful panorama of the cityscape. And I asked Mr. Lee, how do you feel when you see this? I thought he's going to give a wonderful, profound answer about imagination and innovation and vision. He just gave me a prosaic answer. He said, the hardworking and disciplined people built all this.
Okay.
So think about that. You do need imagination, you do need vision, you do need passion, but you also need a hardworking and disciplined people.
You need the execution.
You need the execution. And I think for startups, since this is what this conference is about, it's not just your idea, but can you translate your idea into an actionable plan? Can you con enough people to come along with you on that ride and to actually execute and to implement? And that's why we think we have a role. We are not Tel Aviv. We are not Silicon Valley. I will not pretend that we are. The unique historical, cultural, and economic factors that have created Silicon Valley and Israel are completely, they're not reproducible anywhere else in the world. But what can we do? We are in Asia. This is the fastest growing part of the world. We are hyper-connected. If you look at submarine cable landings, you will realize that there's a disproportionate number of submarine fiber optic cables landing in Singapore. If you want to have a data center with low latency to reach out to other parts of the world, especially the rapidly growing parts of Asia, you've got to be here. If an earthquake breaks the submarine cable in North Asia, the bypass route to connect Europe and America and Australia is here. So we're connected. Another thing, we have a cabinet, half of whom are engineers. I'm only an eye surgeon.
I need a cataract operation. Can we resolve it now?
We've got 3 doctors here, right? So can we do a clinic?
Nephrologist.
So we're going to book you in as an appointment.
My prime minister is a mathematician. He codes. He can code, right? So we get it. We understand high tech. Another advantage we have, because we are so small, you don't have to deal with multiple layers of government. This is a single layer of government. So my pitch to all of you is that you may have invented the idea elsewhere, but the first place to prototype it, to prove that it works in a real city and in a real world is here. And we are part of the digital Silk Road. You know, there used to be a Silk Road connecting China to Europe. We are now part of a digital Silk Road.
Actually, someone's just asked on Pigeonhole, which I think is a very relevant question. Yes. I'm going to start with you, Professor. What makes Singapore then the best place for innovation? So taking some different points there, how would you, to people who, quite a few people, can we just have a raise of hands? How many people it's your first time coming to Singapore? Don't be shy, we've got 1 at the front. There's 2, 3, 4. How many of you are shy and don't want to answer the question?
Ask how many is not, and you will.
Well, maybe I can just chip in first to a quick one to Yossi's question. I think we last month had mourned the passing of Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. But one of the things I think really came out during that period was, I think conviction was a really conviction was a really major part of this. I think the success of Singapore, but it was also a balance between hard work and discipline, and also a degree of innovation and boldness. Because as the Minister mentioned, several of the things that we did were quite different from what conventional wisdom had at that time. And so it wasn't just discipline, it was being able to have discipline and hard work combined with a fairly high level of innovation. And I think this is something that we need to carry on. So what would Singapore offer? I think the most important thing would be talent. Here, I think the universities, the research organizations, the government, the kind of very enlightened leadership that we enjoy are very important, because we create the ecosystem at several levels, at the level of individuals, at the research level, in the enterprise ecosystem, and at the policy level, that create the conducive conditions for innovation to occur, to be test-bedded, and to be brought out. And paradoxically, because in a sense Singapore is a small place, it's also an ideal place for testing things out, but it also kind of forces you to think about applications beyond Singapore, which means that if you do it in Singapore, you very often have to think global. And I think it's this combination would be very important. The talent and the networks that the talent have with other knowledge nodes throughout the world.
I would like, if I may, I would like to suggest maybe another component to explain this unique Singapore phenomena, and this is what I see as a short-time visitor. What I feel, maybe I'm wrong, but what I feel that without even speaking about it, there is a national agreement or national consensus or national unwritten contract that everybody is engaged in his own way, how we can contribute to advance this concept of Singapore, a state, city, a hub which has to accomplish in the world. I see it when I meet Singaporeans in Israel. I have a friend, Yoram Oron, are you in the crowd? Yoram. Yoram, you are here? Yoram Oron, I think, is running Singapore-Israel fund, and he's always talking about this. I think that there is that everybody subscribe to a general vision, and everybody try to motivate to go and to do it. I heard a lot about the grief which took the whole nation a few weeks ago, and everybody was amazed how come the young generation was so engaged. And I think that
Yoram's here, he just walked in on cue.
Yoram, come and sit here. He's the Singaporean spokesman in Israel. So I think that what you see, the grief of the young generation, is because of their identification with this kind of leadership and vision that everybody subscribes. I think this is maybe also part of the explanation.
Just on that point, there's quite a lot of questions I've asked.
I did my job, right?
Yeah, you can go back.
Actually, it's quite a relevant question for both of you. Someone's asked, it's had 12 votes. And it's to both of you. So can we just get a microphone for Yoram as well, please? What do you think that both Singapore and Israel, who are quite leading ecosystems, can learn from each other? Because obviously one of the things that to share, maybe, Professor, you could share that you have your scheme which brings students from Singapore into Israel to work with many startups and people we have. So maybe you can share why you did that. And there's a response, maybe you two can share what you're seeing as well.
NUS has this Overseas Colleges, which is a program which tries to bring our students out to some of the most entrepreneurial places in the world. Started in 2002 in Silicon Valley. Typically, the students intern 1 year in a high-tech startup, and they do courses in Stanford. And we are very pleased that we have started one in Israel. The students spend 6 months there working with high-tech companies, and they are learning a lot. And when you come back to the university, we have housing on campus, which brings them together. And it's just next to incubator facilities that we have. And so around this group of very entrepreneurial students, We have a huge and buzzing community, and they have generated a lot of startup activity, more than 200 startups, some of which have been very successful, including Pigeonhole and PetSnap, which is...
Actually, we're going to hear later today, there's a phenomenal e-health business that's actually going to be making funding announcements. So not to give too much away, but you'll see in a couple of hours, it's one of the largest, and they're a Singapore-grown company that's really changing the way medical, and we'll make sure you're here just before 12, you'll hear more about it. Yoram, do you want to share some of, you were one of the first people I spoke to about this whole Singapore-Israel global ecosystem. Could you share with us?
I'm expected to join another panel, and it's Yossi Vardi tricks to move me from one to another.
He's got a mic. He's got a mic?
Is that fine?
Yes.
Talk into it, please.
Yeah, we see a lot of, after 20 years, we are surprised to see so many startups being started here in Singapore. And even the Grab Taxi story, which caught us by surprise. Anybody from Grab Taxi here? Just raised $250 million from SoftBank, right? And before Yossi started complaining, we were engaged with Grab Taxi as we introduced them to Waze.
Do you want to maybe elaborate for those that...
And we see a lot of entrepreneurship here lately, which frankly was not the case 15 years ago. So we have good reason to go back and forth.
So I'm sorry, it looks a little bit like a football game, but I've just been substituted out because I apologize to the minister that we have to open another center in the university. So if it's okay,
thank you so much. Sorry that we've made you an hour late to your next meeting. I hope you'll come back again, and we'll find out. So thank you. Can we have a round of applause for?
Good. Thank you very much.
Yoram, you need to move my side because now I feel left out. So come and move it. So just on that point, Yossi, do you want to share some of, you yesterday were with a group of students. We went to NUS to do a copy chat. Yossi just arrived and went straight away. What have you seen from little conversations you've had?
Before we go there, I want to, if it's okay, to continue to drill to what the minister said. Do you think that there is a room for Singapore to share your unique method or culture, I don't know what, with other governments, with other nations? Is it transferable, or this is a unique local phenomena?
That's not so straightforward. I think you will realize you can't just transfer Israel to any other part of the world. Similarly, Singapore is an island city-state, with its own culture and history. You can't transplant that immediately, wholesale, lock, stock, and barrel to other parts of the world. What I believe is transferable is technology, is teams, and it's access to a global market. Because we are now facing global challenges, whether you talk about energy, you talk about climate, you talk about food, you talk about water. Those challenges are global. The tools that we generate, the teams that we build, can now go to many other places in the world. I'll give you a real example. Water. It was an existential challenge. If there was going to be a war in the past, it would have been about water. There may be wars in the future in the world because of water. For 50 years, we were obsessed by water. Now, Singapore didn't invent reverse osmosis membranes. But 12 years ago, we realized that using reverse osmosis, we could desalinate water and recycle water at an economically viable price. In 12 years, from 0% to 55% of our water capacity
55%
can now be generated through reverse osmosis membranes. So we took a technology, we prototyped it, we upscaled it, made it a national solution. Today, water companies from Singapore can go all over the world. Their calling card says, I'm from Singapore. We solved the water problem. I have a track record, I have credibility. So those sort of opportunities are transferable.
Do you have international companies which are originated from
Yes.
Singapore.
Yes. So in the same example of what we've done with water, we should also look for opportunities in the digital space, right? We may not have invented, say, instant messaging. I know your son did, right? But which form of instant messaging works best in a multilingual Asian or global context? Proof of concept, upscale, and then move on to the rest of the world. So we understand that Singapore is always going to be just one small node on a global value chain. We are not the center of the universe. The world doesn't spin around.
It's actually quite interesting because some of these themes that we're discussing today and why I think Yossi, myself, and all of us here wanted to come here is you've got access to, we've got a panel talking about how to deal with the modern Muslim millennials, to talking about accessing Thailand and around the strategic center that Singapore has. But the question I want to ask you, before I also do move musical chairs, is what's the role of government in innovation? Because Singapore is leading this way to others. And really, being honest, how have you managed to really exceed, just as a disclaimer, I was an elected local councilman in England, and seeing what innovation is the opposite of what we do. I know this is streaming live, so sorry, David Cameron. But for yourself, of how you've really... how it's happened and what's gone on?
Well, I think the first thing is to be very clear about what government should do and what government should not do, right? So first, is government's responsible for infrastructure. So for instance, I want to be able to guarantee all of you the best broadband experience in the world. That's government infrastructure. Number two, government's responsible for education. We have to have the best equipped universities in the world. And if you come to NUS and you go look at any university in Singapore, and not just the top universities, but look also at the schools, look at the polytechnics, look at the Institute of Technical Education, the sort of education that the average Singaporean, or even the less academically inclined, and you will see that we invest heavily in that. Another role for government is in research and development. So we have the National Research Foundation, and we will put our money in good ideas, big ideas, world-changing ideas, because you've got to support those labs. Next, governments need to provide a reliable, consistent regulatory framework. The contracts need to mean something. Intellectual property needs to be protected. Third, because of our numerous free trade agreements, products which you make here or services which you generate here have access to a global market. So these are things which government can do. Infrastructure, education, research and development, regulatory front. What government should not do is to pretend that we are the startups that are going to be entering the private market and crowding it out. We are referees, we are umpires, we are groundsmen. We are not the guys out there doing the real heavy hitting and doing, breaking new ground. You've got to leave space for the private sector. So it's, again, this getting the right combination, the right blend of private sector and public sector working together to get that alignment, which is so important.
I would like to add one thing to what you said. You said earlier that you think that at the value chain or at the food chain of developing new digital offering, Singapore can take an idea and then build it all the way through. But I want to tell you, if I may suggest, that with the whole new innovation, the whole new model of innovation, which was totally different than what it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, you could innovate only in huge organizations.
Yes.
You had Bell Labs, which was amazing. You had from your area the NIH and all the grants it gave, military organizations, etc. But it was a monopoly of big players. Today, when a kid needs a desk and a laptop and an account to Amazon Web Services, innovation became, the barrier to entry became very much lower. And we see today that even countries which were not prone to do the early innovation of internet, okay, Silicon Valley, Tel Aviv, few countries excelled in it, but We see today young generation getting engaged, and it's easy to do. So once you have few successful models,
Yes.
and people are gaining the ambition, the encouragement, and the desire to go and do it, you see it all over the world. You know, Skype started in some Lithuania, I think.
Estonia.
And this is why number one, I see that more and more great ideas are coming from all over the world.
Yes.
And you see this huge phenomena of accelerators,
Yes.
which you have all over the place, which actually, it's very, very simple concept. It's tell a guy, take $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 and play with it if you come with something wonderful. This didn't exist even 5 years ago. So I think we can be more optimistic regarding the ability of different communities to go into the early stage. And then you add the ability to scale, and you get really something which can be very powerful.
No, I agree with you. We have democratized access to the tools for innovation and entrepreneurship. But there's still two other ingredients. You still need Innovfest unBound. People still need to get together in a room to exchange ideas, shake hands, and look at each other's eyes and decide who you can trust and who you can work with. So that human dimension of forming teams is still absolutely essential. Then there's another dimension, which is actually the world is not short of money to invest, but the world is short of smart money.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, dumb money is, government money is dumb money.
Not always.
But smart money is someone like Yossi who says, been there, done that, I know this will fly or this won't fly. Or
27 of my investments went down the drain.
And that's also on a track record.
Yeah.
So you know what won't work.
Yeah.
So the point is, you still need access to be able to network, and you still need access to smart money. And that's where there is a role for events like this.
Can I bring some insight from 1972?
Yes, please.
About what you say that people have to meet with each other. So I always tell the young guys, you know, you speak about social network and Facebook and all WhatsApp and all these things, and I'm saying none of them can meet the experience of taking your father's big American car and going to a drive-in cinema with your girlfriend and having social network, you know. So doing it via the glass is not enough. Doing it via the glass, the screen is good, but you have to meet and not only in conferences.
But virtual sex will be the real killer app.
We've got an augmented reality app. And I think with that, before I get into serious trouble, on that note, I'm going to say thank you very much.